Wanna play?
Wanna play? Wanna play? Wanna play? Wanna play?
Wanna play?
Hello everybody, welcome to Wanna Play. I am not James McKenna. James sadly could not be here today because he is sick, but he asked me to fill in for him and I said, yeah, sure, why not? And I'm sure you guys are wondering, who the hell is this guy? Well, my name is Ryan. I do have my own channel, but there isn't any content up on it yet. But there will be content up on it soon, so go subscribe. Anyways, if you were a hardcore fan of this channel, you will also recognize me from past streams and collabs I've done with James, and yeah, so sucks he couldn't be here today, but I hope that I'm a good enough replacement just for now. But the video today is going to be ranking the Alien franchise. Now this is a franchise that I stayed away from for a while, which is weird because I've been a horror fan my entire life. For as long as I can remember, I've seen every popular horror franchise there is. I've seen it all, but it took forever for me to finally watch this franchise because I'm not a horror or a sci-fi alien fan. I'm just not into it. But finally, a year and a half, 2 years ago, I checked out this franchise, and I do not regret it. This franchise is full of a bunch of good horror stuff, you know, stuff people like me just eat up and love. And yeah, so without further ado, let's get into it.
Yeah, get into it!
So starting us off, at the bottom of the barrel, what is, in my opinion, the worst movie in this franchise is Alien 3. Now, when I first watched this movie last year, I was dumbfounded by how much of a worse movie this is compared to Aliens. I mean, Aliens is an absolutely iconic movie. There's barely anything negative I could say about this movie. But then we have Alien 3. I mean, horrible. The look of the alien, the CGI that they have for this alien in this movie gives the opening in Seed of Chucky a run for its money. I mean, the CGI is that bad. And not only that, this movie is also just really freaking boring, really dull. 50% of it is just boring, dull moments that you don't care about. I found myself whipping out my phone throughout this entire movie because I got so bored of watching it. And not only that, the only good parts of this movie, the only parts that are action-packed and having you look at the screen, you have to watch the shitty CGI alien as well. And there is a few scenes where he's not CGI and he actually looks really cool. I think the concept of the alien in this movie is actually really cool, and it could have been amazing on screen if they didn't use the crappy CGI and if they just executed it better. But of course they didn't, and it looked terrible. I do not like how Ripley landed near a male-only prison. The male-only prison took her in, and keep in mind, by the way, this male-only prison is filled with mostly sexual harassers of women, people that have done insanely gross things to women. That's why they're in the prison. And in the beginning of the movie, they kill off Newt, which was the little girl that Ripley spent the entire last half of the movie trying to save, but they kill her off in the first damn credit scene of the movie, along with her, Lance Hendrickson, who plays the robot in Aliens, and the last surviving soldier. 3 of the best characters, other than Ripley of course, in that movie just killed off instantly like they were nothing and replaced by a bunch of bald rapist prisoners. It just pisses me off that they wasted such good characters like that for these random ass dudes that no one cares about. And another thing that I find really annoying in this movie is that when Ripley finds out that all those characters are dead, all those characters that she formed the bond with in Aliens, the kid that she literally risked her life to save, she had about 30 seconds of remorse and then she goes banging and falling in love with this medic guy. Like, barely any remorse, barely any kind of emotion about the people that she cared about and aliens dying. That really pissed me off. That just does not seem like Ripley, and I think that is just very, very, very shitty writing. That is not how that character should have been treated in Alien 3, and it's just really, really, really annoying how she's sitting here falling in love with this random-ass bald dude instead of actually, you know, having some remorse over the people she risked her life for. Yeah, overall, this movie is just really, really, really shitty. I did not like it whatsoever. It had a few redeeming qualities, a few good scenes, very few. And yeah, other than the very few good scenes, such as Ripley falling to her death and the alien exploding, nothing worth watching in this movie. If you want to check out this franchise, just know that this is definitely, probably, in my opinion, the lowest point in the franchise. Alright, coming in at number 5 for me is going to be Prometheus. Now, every single movie from this point on in the list, I don't hate as much, not nearly as much as I do Alien 3. All these movies from here on out I can actually enjoy and will probably rewatch in the future. But this one, it's not necessarily a bad movie, it's actually a really good movie for what it is, but it's just really not my type of movie. The cinematography is great. It is very interesting, but also very boring in the same way. Like, if you really, really, really love the Alien franchise and you want to know more about the backstory of the universe, the backstory of the xenomorphs, this is definitely the movie for you. But for me, I'm just your typical slasher fan, slasher horror fan. I'm always into some good backstory, but not when the entire movie is literally just backstory. But the parts in this movie that are interesting, the parts in this movie that did catch my eye were actually really, really, really cool. I think that the way that they handled a lot of the backstory, I think that they really executed that very, very well. I think that this movie had a really cool final girl. This movie didn't really start getting interesting until you know that this girl is the final girl and she has to cut herself open and take out the, whatever this is. Is this a squid?
Congratulations, Reg. It's a squid.
It really doesn't start kicking in and getting entertaining up until that point happens, and then you really start focusing and you're like, oh, you know, what's gonna happen next? But as I was saying, this final girl in this movie is actually, in my opinion, the second best final girl, other than Ripley, of course, the legend Ripley. But she was actually very cool. She was in a lot of cool gross out scenes. The CGI in this movie was actually very, very good, and as you just heard with Alien 3, that's not something that you can say a lot in this franchise, but the CGI in this movie is actually really, really good. Some of the CGI kills, normally CGI kills in horror movies aren't that good, but in this movie, they actually execute it really well. Like when those snake-looking alien things are in the cave that they are searching through, and one of the guys has to cut the snake thing off of another guy, but then the acid sprays on his helmet, and the helmet melts onto his face. That was a really, really, really cool scene. And there's a lot of scenes just like that throughout the movie that are really cool and really well done that are CGI. And not only the CGI in this movie, the the real special effects that this movie does have is also executed very well, and I think that's a really cool thing, considering this is a movie which is mostly CGI. But yeah, overall this movie is not bad. It is very good for what it is, and if you're really, really, really into the Alien franchise and you want to know more about, you know, the backstory and whatnot, like I said, this is definitely the movie for you. But for me, it didn't really do it for me completely. Of course, it's not a bad movie. It's just really not for me, and that's why I have it placed this low. Alright, coming up next for me at number 4 is going to be Alien Covenant. Now this movie is also, for what it is, really, really good, just like Prometheus. But this movie has a lot more redeeming qualities to it, to me at least, than Prometheus did. This movie flows really, really, really well with Prometheus, considering that it's directed by the same person and the time gap that both of them were made weren't that far apart. And yeah, this movie is much more fun and action-packed than Prometheus is. There's a lot more gore, there's a lot more alien scenes, there's a lot more, you know, just good stuff, action in general, stuff that horror fans like me can really enjoy. It has more of that in this movie than Prometheus did, and I think that's why I like this movie a little bit more than I do Prometheus. Another thing I really love about this movie is the mix with new and old, and what I mean by that is you can already tell by Prometheus that they're taking this franchise in a whole nother route by giving us all this new stuff and all this backstory, all these new alien species, and the way that they handle the new and old alien species in this movie, I really, really like. I love how they mix it up really good. Like, they give us the classic alien egg, the classic face hugger, but then instead of the alien popping out of your chest with just the tail and whatnot, and then it grows off of camera, it pops out of you, and it's just like a mini xenomorph, and it just, you know, keeps growing and whatnot off camera. I think that's really, really cool. I also love the way that the new species that's introduced in this movie pops out. The way that it can basically pop out anywhere. It popped out of a guy's back, it popped out of a guy's mouth, and those xenomorphs are freaking terrifying. If I had to choose which one of those I think are scarier, the original or that xenomorph, if I'm being honest, I'm gonna have to choose that one. Not because it's more necessarily, not that it's more terrifying, but it's more unsettling looking. How it has the human type skin, how it's pale, how it looks super duper moist and damp, and the way its head shaped. It's just really creepy to me, and I love it. This movie is, like I said, just a lot more fun than Prometheus is. Much better kills. This movie has much better kills than Prometheus did. Even though, like I said, Prometheus had some really, really good kills for what that movie was, but this movie takes that and just adds an extra layer of horror, gore, goodness to it, if you know what I mean. This movie had great cinematography, just like Prometheus. This is what I mean by these two movies flow really well. The cinematography in both these movies are top-notch, maybe the best in the franchise, and they just flow together so good that if you're into these kind of movies, you could watch these two back-to-back like they're one long movie. And like I said, for what these movies are, these movies are mostly like fan service for the people that really want to know more about the universe. This movie is definitely for those people. And I do genuinely enjoy these movies, but just not enough to have them higher on my list. Now, coming in at number 3 for me is going to be Alien Resurrection. Now, this movie is a doozy, okay? This movie has major star power. This movie has Winona Ryder, Brad Dourif, Tuco from Breaking Bad, the dude from iCarly. This movie has a bunch of extremely notable people, yet this movie is so insanely goofy and weird and bad. But it's also goofy, weird, and bad in a way that I can actually enjoy it. This movie is annoyingly fun. Like, I don't want to like this movie, yet I found myself really, really enjoying it. This movie is absolutely ridiculous. One of the things that I loved about the original is that even though it's futuristic, of course, we don't have spaceships that are able to travel to other galaxies. All the futuristic stuff that they had in that movie, it felt natural. It felt like if we did have that stuff in real life, that's what it would look like. It wasn't over the top. and ridiculous. In this movie, it's the complete opposite. We have crappy looking futuristic pistols, the ability to clone people and basically make them superhuman, and whatever the fuck this is. Jesus Christ, what the hell is that? And, you know, this movie, it's just nothing compared to what the original is. And even though this movie has all that goofy, weird stuff, for some reason, I still find myself enjoying it. Now, in my opinion, xenomorphs are one of the scariest horror villains in the entire world of horror. But in this movie, at least for a couple scenes, it makes them a little less scary, a little less intimidating just for a minute. I mean, I never thought I'd see Brad Dourif making out with a xenomorph through glass. I mean, that's definitely a sight I'd never think I'd have to see. And there's just so much ridiculous stuff like that through this movie, and it really separates itself from the entire franchise. Like, this movie is nothing like any other movie in this franchise. And that could be a good or bad thing depending on who you ask. This movie is also filled with really dumb characters, I noticed. Like, dumber than the characters in movies before. Like, we get a dude in a wheelchair with xenomorphs on top of it. He shoots a xenomorph, realizes that they bleed acid. He looks down at his legs, he can't feel anything, and he realizes it's melting through his legs. And he's touching it and burning himself, and so he continues to shoot the xenomorph and continues to have acid rain down upon him.
Put in reverse, Terry! Put in reverse! Oh, Lord!
Now, how he didn't die from this, I don't know, but it's just stupid things like this that characters do throughout this movie that just really irritated me. And another thing that I really didn't like about this movie is how Ripley is kind of superhuman. I mean, again, it's not really a Ripley, it's not Ripley, I mean, it's a freaking clone, okay? It's a clone with Ripley's memories, with a lot of the same things Ripley has, but it's just not fully Ripley. And she has superhuman strength and can freaking kick anyone's ass in basketball, which, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of cool. But I just really do not like what they did with Ripley in this movie, even though Alien 3 was not a good movie whatsoever. The ending to Ripley and her story in that movie was not that bad. I feel like if that ending to Ripley was just executed a bit better, if the movie was better, that would have been a perfect ending for her and her story. But in this movie, they bring her back in one of the worst ways you can bring a horror legend back possible. And I just really was not into it. I'm sure a lot of people like how badass she is in this movie, and I do too. But knowing that it's not fully Ripley being that badass, it just kind of takes away from it a little bit. It's like watching Halloween Ends and watching Corey get all the cool kills, and it's just not the same because you know it's not actually Michael Myers. Yeah, overall this movie just isn't that good. There is lots of very cool kills, very fun kills. The ending is actually really, really cool ending. One of my favorite endings in this franchise, actually. And like I said, this movie I annoyingly like. Like I said before, I really don't like this movie, but I also do. It's so ridiculously bad that it's fun to watch. It's one of those movies. Now, coming in at number 2. Now, I know you guys know what the last 2 movies are on this list, and those 2 movies, I had such an insanely hard time choosing which one I liked more and which one to put at 2 and 1. But really, really thinking about it, I have to put Aliens at number 2. Now, I know probably the majority of people have this movie at their number 1, but the original Alien just does something for me, which makes it a little bit better than Aliens does. But that does not mean by any means that I do not like Aliens. Aliens, this movie is so insanely fun right from the get-go. It's the perfect mix between horror and action, and just, it's such a fun time. This is definitely by far the most rewatchable movie on this list. And I feel like that's one of the main reasons why a lot of people have it at their number one, because most movies in this franchise, except for Resurrection, are really slow-paced, and they rely on the intensity of the moment and maybe like jump scares here and there and like character building. This movie just goes all for it, dude. It has one of my favorite scenes in the entire franchise when the whole group of soldiers, they walk into this room and all the xenomorphs are around the walls, and you can't tell they're there because they're all just hiding and blending in. But then they slowly realize that they're all there, and then a huge battle breaks out.
They're all around us, man. Jesus.
Maybe they don't show up on infrared at all.
And freaking people die, people get caught on fire. Xenomorphs get freaking exploded. I mean, so many cool things happen in just this one scene. I mean, it's like that scene alone is just a bite of what this movie has to offer. I mean, this movie is so fun and action-packed that one of the most fun and action-packed scenes in this movie happens within the first couple acts. And then the final act where the freaking Mama Queen Xenomorph comes out to play. The freaking scene where Ripley realizes how insanely massive and scary the Queen Xenomorph is. Is easily top 10 best horror scenes of all time. I mean, it is so badass the way the other xenomorphs are just creepily creeping around the corners, just watching and hissing. It just intensifies the scene and makes it so much more fun to watch. And then, you know, once she breaks loose and she goes chasing after Ripley and Newt, it's just such a fun movie, such a fun time. I love how we get character build for Ripley. We find out that she had a daughter, but then the daughter died of old age because Ripley was in a cryogenic sleep chamber or something like that for over 50 years. And, you know, and in a way, Newt kind of becomes, you know, her second daughter, kind of sadly, but the replacement for her daughter that died in real life. And it's one of the main things that really irritates me, how Alien 3 just killed her off like she was nothing. And, but with Alien 3 out of our brains, in my mind, Newt and Ripley lived a happily ever after and just walked off into the sunset and had a beautiful life. That's what we all wish could have happened with that character. Now, of course, in my number one spot, no surprise to anyone watching this video, act surprised people, it is the original 1979 Alien. This movie was so much better than I expected it to be around my first watch. Because you guys know, like I mentioned in the beginning, that I'm not into alien and sci-fi flicks. But this movie is so good, it is easily in my top 20, top 15 horror movies of all time. This movie is so good. I love the cinematography. I love how eerie and isolated and kind of hopeless it feels. Like in the movie poster alone, in space, no one can hear you scream. I mean, imagine how terrifying that would be in real life. And you know, again, like I mentioned, the cinematography when they're on the I forgot what it's called, but the alien planet where they find the xenomorph eggs, how creepy and isolated it looks, and how it just looks, it looks like a very dreadful setting, and it looks like you would not want to be there. This movie has scenes where basically nothing is happening. They're just walking through hallways or whatever, but you know that the alien is somewhere. You know that the alien is lurking somewhere. And then the tension just builds and builds and builds, and you're wondering, what is this character gonna die? What's gonna happen? Is the xenomorph gonna pop out? You know, what's going on? But it either ends up does or doesn't popping out, and either way, it still keeps you watching, keeps you staring at your screen, and the fact that this movie is that good to keep you watching during, in all actuality, the dullest parts, that's how you know it's a good movie. And not to mention, one of the, just like in Aliens, this movie also has an all-time great scene, the original chest burster scene where the chest burster pops out of this guy's chest. And I mean, upon first watch, I mean, I basically knew nothing about this movie. Upon first watch, I was like, what the fuck is going on?
Oh, God!
And then, you know, of course, the alien popped out, and it was such a fun scene. I was so confused, and it was just, I cannot put into words how good this movie is, you guys. I love Alien. And of course, it introduces some of the most iconic horror movie characters of all time. Of course, Ripley, one of, if not the most badass and cool final girl there is. And then the goddamn Xenomorph. In my opinion, the scariest horror villain there is. I mean, if I seen Michael, Freddy, Jason, Chucky, any of those guys in real life, I would be scared, but not nearly as scared as I would be if, say, a Xenomorph was chasing after me, because with a Xenomorph, you have about a 0.1% chance of surviving, and that's a fact. Xenomorphs are scary as shit. And like I mentioned before when I was talking about Alien Resurrection, this movie is, of course, filled with very futuristic stuff, like, you know, the giant spaceships, us being able to travel to galaxies light years away, robots. Of course, we don't have that stuff in real life, but if we did have that stuff in real life, that's how it seems it would be. We don't have any friggin' ray guns or friggin' nanobots or dumb, shitty, stupid, futuristic stuff like that in this movie. It feels real, even though it's clearly not, which is a very cool thing I like about this movie. Alright, you guys, all in all, this movie is easily 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, 20 out of 20, 100 out of 100. This movie is iconic. I love it. I may love it more than a lot of people do, but I don't care. I'm on here to express my love and or hate for these movies, and I think I have succeeded in that in this video. So, yeah, my number one is the original 1979 Alien. Alrighty, you guys, that is going to do it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did like it, consider liking. Fucking beating the shit out of that like button. Damn, that was aggressive. And consider subscribing because James posts awesome content. And again, I'm sorry he couldn't be here today, but, you know, he's sick. But I hope I was a good enough replacement. I hope I entertained you guys for however long this video was. And, yeah, subscribe to James's channel. And also mine. If you like this video, you will definitely like the content I will be posting on my channel. Now, like I said, of course, I don't have any content up on my channel yet, but I will soon, so keep an eye out for that. And yeah, I hope you guys like this video. That is going to do it for today's video. How does James do his outro again? Oh yeah. Goodbye, good night, bang.